What if I told you that being ignored activates the exact same part of your brain as being punched in the face? What if the silent treatment isn't just annoying, it's actually a form of psychological torture that researchers have tested, measured, and confirmed? And what if the reason you can't stand being overlooked goes back not 5 years, not 500 years, but 5 million years? Don't go anywhere, because this story goes much deeper than you think. You've felt it before. Maybe someone didn't text you back. Maybe you got left out of a conversation. Maybe you said something in a room and nobody reacted, not even a nod, just silence. And here's what's interesting. You know it's not a big deal, and yet something inside you burns. Why does being ignored feel so personal, so painful? Why does it stick with you for hours, sometimes days, when 1,000 other things don't? The answer isn't simple, and honestly, the full picture is kind of terrifying. We're talking about one of the most powerful survival mechanisms ever built into a living creature. A system so old, so deeply wired, that modern humans are still completely at its mercy. In 2003, psychologist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA designed an experiment. Participants were placed inside an fMRI machine and asked to play a simple computer game called 3 players throwing a virtual ball back and forth. Simple, almost boring. But here's the thing. The other 2 players weren't real people. They were controlled by the computer. And at a certain point in the game, the 2 fake players just stopped throwing the ball to the participant. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was insulted. Nobody even spoke. The participant was just left out of a ball game. You'd think the brain wouldn't even register it. You'd be wrong. The scans showed activation in an area called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. That's the same region that processes physical pain. Real, actual, bodily pain. Eisenberger published the findings. Other researchers ran variations of the experiment, same results. Again and again, researchers tried something else. They told participants before the experiment, the other players are just a computer program. Knowing this, logically, the exclusion shouldn't hurt. You're being ignored by a machine. But the brain didn't care. The pain response still fired. Which means this reaction isn't rational. It's not something you choose. Something much older than rational thought is running this program. To understand why the brain treats social rejection like physical danger, you have to go back, way back. 100,000 years ago, a human being alone in the wild wasn't an independent free spirit. A human alone in the wild was dinner. We weren't the fastest animal. We weren't the strongest. We didn't have claws or venom or the ability to run 40 miles an hour. What we had, what made us genuinely dangerous and genuinely survivable, was each other. Groups meant protection. Groups meant shared hunting. Groups meant someone watched while you slept. Being excluded from the group wasn't embarrassing. It was a death sentence. So your brain developed an early warning system. The moment social connection felt threatened, it needed to get your attention immediately. And what's the fastest, most reliable way to get someone's attention? Pain. So the brain wired social rejection into the same alarm. Same urgency, same signal. This is what scientists call the social pain overlap theory. Can the same things that reduce physical pain also reduce social pain? In 2010, a study led by Nathan Duell at the University of Kentucky did something that sounds almost absurd. They gave participants acetaminophen, that's Tylenol, a standard over-the-counter painkiller, every day for 3 weeks. Another group took a placebo. The group taking the real painkiller reported significantly lower social pain. The physical painkiller reduced neural responses to social rejection. Now, before you run to your medicine cabinet, researchers are very clear. This is not a recommendation. This is a glimpse into the architecture, into how deeply this wiring goes. If the same chemistry that blunts a headache can take the edge off being left out, then the pain of being ignored is literally a physical experience. This system was built for a world where being excluded actually determined whether you survived. That world is gone, but the system is still running, at full power. In a world where you can be ignored by 400 people simultaneously on the internet before breakfast, there's a word for systematic social exclusion: ostracism. The word itself comes from ancient Athens. When Athenians wanted to exile someone, they held a vote. Each citizen scratched a name onto a piece of broken pottery called an ostracon. Get enough votes, you had 10 days to leave the city. You weren't harmed, you weren't shamed in public. You were simply removed, excluded, erased from the community. Kipling-Williams has spent decades studying ostracism in modern settings. Ostracism doesn't just hurt, it attacks for fundamental human needs, simultaneously: 1. Belonging, the need to feel connected to others. 2. Self-esteem, the sense that you have value. 3. Control, the feeling that you have influence over your situation. 4. Meaningful existence, the sense that you matter, that you exist in relation to others. Ostracism threatens all four at once. In real time, simultaneously, that one unanswered message, that moment someone looked past you. Your brain didn't experience a minor inconvenience, it experienced a 4-alarm threat to your fundamental sense of self. Williams also found that after being ostracized, people don't just seek out new social connection to recover. They recover through parasocial connection. 2. That means fictional characters, books, television shows, movies. People who felt excluded and then watched their favorite TV show showed measurably reduced feelings of social pain. The brain, when it comes to social belonging, is somewhat flexible in what it counts. Meaningful narrative connection, even with fictional people, appears to partially satisfy the need for belonging, which might explain why people become genuinely attached to book characters. Why losing a TV show feels like losing friends. Your brain is ancient. It is running ancient software, and it will count what it can find. Not all responses to being ignored are passive. Some of them are considerably more dramatic. Here's where the science takes a sharp turn. Some people become prosocial. They try harder. They cooperate more. They go out of their way to be noticed, included, valued. They essentially turn the charm all the way up. But others, particularly those who experience chronic or repeated exclusion, move in a very different direction. Studies have found that prolonged social exclusion is associated with reduced empathy, increased aggression, decreased self-regulation. Williams documented a later stage response where individuals stopped trying to reconnect and instead stopped caring about social norms altogether. The alarm has been ringing so long, and nothing has fixed it, that some people begin to stop hearing it. This isn't an excuse, but it is an explanation. The silent treatment isn't silence, it's a message, a very loud one. We live in a world that is more connected than any point in human history, and somehow, loneliness is at record levels. The feeling of being unseen is arguably more common, not less, because the system running inside you wasn't built for scale. It was built for a tribe of 30 people around a fire. Now that system is trying to process 7 billion potential sources of belonging, and it cannot do it, so it glitches. It overreacts to strangers on the internet while missing the real relationships in front of you. It chases likes from people who don't know your name while missing the person sitting across the table. You hate being ignored because your brain is still trying to keep you alive, using instructions written for a world that no longer exists. That's not a flaw. That's history, millions of years of it, encoded in every neuron. But knowing it, understanding the system that's running, that's the first step to not being entirely controlled by it. You can acknowledge the alarm without automatically obeying it. You can feel the sting of being overlooked and recognize it for what it is, an ancient signal firing in a modern context. And you can choose, deliberately, to invest that attention where it actually matters. Here's the question I'll leave you with. If your brain genuinely cannot tell the difference between being ignored and being in danger, how many of the things you did today were actually your choices, and how many were just the ancient alarm going off? Think about it. If you enjoyed exploring this mystery with us, subscribe to There are countless fascinating stories still waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, stay curious.